And here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Raw Thursday morning edition. It's Thursday after the Denver mini retreat. And man, wow, what a retreat. It's really interesting to me because I was having this conversation the other day with somebody who has not tried psychedelics, and they're wondering, why? Why do you do these things? Because often it's depicted like in movies and whatnot as, oh, things are moving and you're getting all weird and goofy. And yeah, that's not it. Well, there is a whole phase that's like that. That's really if you're wanting to experiment with a higher dose and trip, as it were. Whereas, these events that we do, because the doses are so small and negligible from the start, what you're really doing is you're just relaxing into your average state of mind. Like you're really just coming to terms with the stuff that's maybe happening behind what you think is happening, not even far behind, like just a layer deeper. You think you're doing it, you think you're doing something because of one reason, and then all of a sudden you relax a little, go, oh shit, why do I feel like I'm uncomfortable when I'm not doing that? And you're like, oh, it's because that actually gives me a sense of security. Oh, I'm doing that because it actually has a payoff that I wasn't looking at. And so you get this very sobering look at yourself, but it very much is that experience of growing up, taking in a little bit more nuance and looking at your life and then moving on with it after the fact, but doing so in a house full of people that for the most part are just going through the same process. They're not trying to feel high. They're not trying to trip out. They're not trying to do all that. They're going through whatever it is they're going through. So I just had that kind of experience. The Denver experience was amazing and transformative, and I feel raw and a little naked coming out of it. And I think that's the point. I just wanted to bring this up because I wanted to say thank you to everybody who can make it to that retreat. And thank you to everybody who's made it to every retreat before that, because we've just come to the end of our first run of retreats. And I mean that sincerely. This was it. Denver was it. That was the end of the first 11 retreats for Dualistic Unity. We are taking a break. We are planning Port Alberni. The 9-day retreat will be starting November 2nd. The tickets for that will be available very soon. Tier 3 supporters obviously get first crack at those tickets. But we're taking a break, and now we are working with our investors. Now we are reaching out to some of the people that we can collaborate with. We're starting to do more stuff locally. We are being more creative. We're having more fun. We are about to just get into a whole new phase of Dualistic Unity. And we couldn't have gotten here without all of you, all of the listeners, everybody who's come to these retreats, everybody who's come to the groups, everybody who's come into the conversation, and even just come in for a short period of time and then left and went, fuck that guy. Whether you realize it or not, you've helped. And this has been an incredible ride for me. And so I just want to say thank you to you, listener. Regardless if you are new to the conversation, you've been here for a while, you've come to the groups, you've met us in person, doesn't matter. Fact is that every pebble leads to the avalanche, and that avalanche is growing. I'm fucking stoked.
Likewise. Yeah. I mean, because none of this we wouldn't still be going through, kicking this if it weren't for anyone who's ever tuned in or listened to an episode or hopped into Discord or hopped on even a free call on Wednesdays. So it's, it means the world to us, and this business thing we call a business that, is we're doing our best to make work, and it's exciting. And I think we're at a spot right now where, we've been through, we've done a lot of stuff. We've learned a lot, kind of just like as we go, and thinking like, is this going to work? I don't really know what's going on all the time, but it's like, it's settled now. And there's been a lot of lessons, I think, that I've definitely taken from that. And you mentioned the sobering component of mushrooms. And I think for me, like the last couple of retreats have been that, but there's been an appreciation in seeing that, with the process of growing up or seeing sobering sides of yourself, when you see them, you see that there isn't an element of control that goes with that, but there is that recognition of influence and the recognition that, most of the things that we go through are self-induced to some degree, or at least our response to things. It's not to say it's entirely, external circumstances. There's a lot of things that are out of our control, obviously. And I don't mean to say control in the sense of being able to get what you want and live your life exactly as you want to, because you span that out, and that no one would actually want any of that. But the ability to respond to a situation that you're in, like immediately, and make the most of it, and see that, and with my last couple mushroom experiences, I've seen just how much, as we're growing up, we look to other people, and that also goes with blame in a sense, or thinking that something else is doing something to you, if you're not willing to recognize that it's actually stemming from yourself. And there can be almost layers to it. There can be layers to that you almost can't even see without something like mushrooms to help just a little bit. And it's not to say that you can't see it, but it's a lot easier to hold on to some certain perception of ourselves that feels good, that's, placed on top of all of these other real things about ourselves that can, I don't know, help shift our experience, dictate our experience, influence our experience a little bit differently. And so as you peel through those things and are more self-honest, which mushrooms can certainly help you do, certainly help you see sides of yourself like that. There's a lot more freedom, but it doesn't come without discomfort. And I think that's something that I've kept in mind as I've, I don't know, noticed things about myself that maybe I wasn't before, but there's been a lot more of that sense of influence that goes with it, which is exciting, when you settle into that, like, oh, there is the ability to respond in any which way. And if everything is uncertain, then all those things I'm sure of outside of what's going on right now, I never am. Not even close.
No, I definitely resonate with that, because this last retreat definitely felt sobering, and it's because there were a lot of things that I was doing, and a lot of concepts that I was holding on to feel better, and I got to take a closer look at that, and so it felt sobering and clarifying, just to be able to admit that, I was only holding on to those concepts. I was only in those habit loops because I was uncertain, and I was coping with that uncertainty. And so I feel sober to that. And in that, I feel grateful that, yeah, I definitely was holding on. I definitely have some insecurities. I definitely have some fears. Despite the fact that they don't overwhelm me in every minute, doesn't mean that they don't exist. And for me, it feels like I forgot about the fact that, yeah, no, I am still insecure. I am still scared. I am still uncertain. I do freak out. I do cope with those fears, because I get into these like flows, or not flow, but like I get into this groove. And because the groove doesn't feel like it's this endless pit of despair, I forget that I feel the despair. And so that's what I got to take another look at, was like, oh yeah, just because I'm not crying every minute doesn't mean that in the background I'm not terrified. Oh no, I am still. Okay, all right, then that's okay. I can still move forward despite being able to look at that fear dead in the face and still keep going. And so I feel incredibly grateful and sober after this last retreat.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, because it's almost like we have the ability to take whatever it is we're feeling and make it worse. Like, so you're insecure. Now you're feeling insecure about your insecurity. That's so much work. Oh my God, that's terrible, or you're sad. Now you're sad about being sad. That's the cycle of depression, where you actually start to feel sorry for yourself for feeling shitty. So now you're feeling shitty about being shitty, and that's the whole point, is that you go through this and you're like, okay, well, what if it's just what it is? Like, what if I'm just feeling insecure? That's it. What if there's no problem there? What if there's just stuff to learn from? There are just insights. There's nothing wrong with me because I'm insecure. There's nothing wrong with me because I'm still relying on this idea of myself to give me some strength to move forward. Yeah, I think that's something that we tend to do with this ego conversation as we start to go, ego bad. Ego's not bad. Ego's a lot of fun. It's the basis of most of our artwork and creativity and conversation and invention and shit. Stories, all of it. Yay for ego. Because if you didn't have an ego, you'd have no characters in the story. You'd have no story. Reality moved on. The end. That would pretty much be it, you know, and everybody has won. Move forward into the future, period. And so when you have this idea of yourself, it's important to recognize that the problem isn't necessarily the idea of yourself, it's your reaction to it. It's okay to judge yourself. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to think you're not enough. It's okay to get a little high on yourself from time to time. It's okay to beat yourself up. It's okay to go through all this stuff. But then to take that and go, yeah, but since I'm doing it, there's something wrong. That gets so much worse. And that is the danger of the ego conversation, is that it becomes its own ego. All of a sudden it's, right, I can't measure myself against these standards. How much am I not measuring myself against these standards? Which is another fucking standard.
Yeah, another measurement.
Exactly. And so it can become really complicated, or at least it seems really complicated. You're like, okay, well then what do I fucking do? Nothing except just open your eyes and just pay attention with some self-honesty. Because it's our tendency to want to do better that makes us feel like we're doing worse. And what I mean is that when you have one of those sobering moments and you go, oh shit, wow, I'm actually really running from this feeling of not being liked. Don't judge yourself for that. Go, oh, wow, that's what I've been doing. Period. That's it. That's the end of the whole fucking loop. That. Oh, wow, that's what I'm doing. Stop. Don't go any further than that. Don't go, and therefore I've been doing shitty. Don't go, I've got to do better. Don't do any of that shit where you're like, now I'm in control. Now I'm going to take that as a reason to think I know what the fuck is going on. Don't do that. You had a moment of recognition. Don't turn it into confusion. Allow that recognition to change you. You don't need to sit there and make it more than it is. Just go, oh, shit. All right. And move on. But that's why self-honesty is so important. Self-honesty is the biggest component of this, because you have to be willing to look at things and then be honest about the fact that you still want to beat yourself up for it, even though that doesn't help. That's okay. The only reason you want to beat yourself up is because you think it's going to get you somewhere where you're not doing the same stupid shit. But the stupid shit is based on trying to get somewhere where you're not doing the same stupid shit. Just be where you are. It's a loop. You really have to have this leap of insight to recognize, like, fuck, if I respond to the fear in fear, that's fear. I'm still going into the fear loop. Just look at it. Just look at it. And in that, you will have an insight. You will have a moment of recognition, and it will change your life. But stop expecting it to be something you can grab onto with both hands and use everywhere. It's only meant to be used once, when you see it. Then you got to find a new one.
Yeah. And it can be that feeling, kind of like I saw a dude mention, he was talking about Christianity or someone who's a believer, and he made a video just about how, you know, just spend a day not believing that you're a Christian or not believing you're this thing. And immediately, you know, people were responding like, well, yeah, but if I die and then I'm not believing, then I'm going to go to hell and am eternally damned. And I think sometimes it doesn't feel too dissimilar to not be trying to keep yourself under control, you know, to not be trying to maintain this perception of how you're doing. Because if you were to take a break from that, there's almost like everything opens up, and then you're like, well, I don't know which direction I'm going to take something. I don't know how I'm going to act. I don't know how I'm going to be. I don't know what the response is going to be, despite it also being just as unknown before. You weren't focused on how you were doing, on how something was going, on assuming that you can even know that. And so taking that leap, like that leap of faith, where it's like, okay, I keep, you know, spiraling into this feeling of a pit that's starting with yourself. It's starting with your own sense of thinking you know what's happening right now, because that's where it is rooted from. And so if you go through a period of time where it's like, oh, I've been judging myself a lot recently, I've been going through these things, and as you go through them, like, you can kind of start to recognize where they're coming from, and then you can apply those things without assuming that, you know, you should have done it sooner. Like, there's no way to get it sooner before right now. You can't have gotten it sooner. It's impossible. So the irrelevance of assuming that it should have been done, oh, I should have let it go by now. You know, I should have let it go by yesterday. I shouldn't have this, that, like all these things that have played out. Like, you can't go back to those. You can't go back to those situations. You can't change them. The only spot that you can drop that stuff, or drop the assumption that you know how you're doing, is right now. And it's like, of course, but at the same time, like, we can spend a lot of time thinking back to points that, you know, we should have done something differently or acted differently. And all that does is keep us in that same loop, of feeling like you're sure. And it got you to the point right now where you recognized that. But if you keep focusing on it and assuming that you should have been different, or trying to control then a response based on that, instead of just letting go of the thing that got you in that spot, which was the self-judgment, was the false certainty, then it's going to keep playing out. You know, it's going to keep happening. But again, it comes from you. It really does.
Yeah. I think what you said there is important. Like, it doesn't matter necessarily what illusion you're holding on to. You always end up with this fear of falling off the ball. You always end up with this fear of ending up back in whatever your preferred hell might be. Right? Because it's always the idea that you're failing, that you're not enough, that you're disconnected, that there's a punishment for doing so, even that you deserve that punishment. So you can see, even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not believing in the afterlife, there is still this fear of what could happen in life. Where will I end up? Will everybody hate me? Will I be alone? Will I be ostracized from society? You know, will I live in misery my entire existence? All of this is a fear that is always legitimately in the spectrum of things that we can think. But they're all based on the idea of yourself. Because if you think about a lot of the things you're afraid of, they're things that diminish that idea of yourself. Right? People don't like me. Why does that matter? What if they're all assholes? What if all of those people are actually judgmental pricks and they don't like you because you're not judging? Is that a bad thing?
No.
The brain doesn't think of it that way, though. It immediately just fears judgment. It fears isolation. It fears being alone. Well, what if that being alone is in contrast, or because of your own sense of sincerity and authenticity? What if you were being rejected by people who aren't growing or need to grow themselves, and your growth is indicative of why you're being pushed away?
Right.
The brain doesn't think about that, and so it creates these feelings, and we react to them, and then we're like, oh God, I don't want that to happen, not ever thinking maybe that's the best thing that could happen. And that's it. And we try to avoid that instead of plunging into it, and that's the basis of most of our fear. You know, I don't want to go into a social situation because people might judge me. It's like, so what if they judge you? Why does that matter?
Right.
Well, because then I'm not going to fit in, right? But you're going to learn shit about yourself, and you might learn shit about them. And if you're judging them, or rather, if they're judging you, and then you learn to actually talk to them regardless of it, they may have an opportunity to stop judging you. But if you never go there, you just reinforce their judgments. So nothing works the way that we want it to. We want to get to, you know, this utopia. We want to get to this better way of living, but we don't want to go through the shit to get there. Right? We don't. We want to be pleasant, or we just want to be argumentative. You know, we don't want to look at, you know, the argumentation as a form of egotism, and then we don't want to have a conversation about it because that's unpleasant to my ego. And that's what it is.
That's right.
You know, and it's funny. Like, we have somebody who's, and they're on your feed at the moment. I won't mention their name because they're absurd, but they used to haunt my feed as well, to the point where I'm just like, you need to go. Like, this is ridiculous. ridiculous.
Yes.
But the point is that they're going through this thing where they're like, you guys don't make any sense. You guys aren't doing anything of value. This isn't going anywhere. You guys are just sitting there talking about nothing. Blah, blah, blah. And if you listen to the comments, there's nothing there. It's not like anything's being offered. It's not like there's anything that's being passed on. There's no, well, it's not even, it's no conversation. Give us a fucking topic, like whatever it is you'd like to do. But that's not the point. The point is that I don't feel like I'm enough. And so everybody around me is somebody I need to judge, because if I don't judge them, I'm left with this feeling of not being enough. And so I run from that feeling. And that's what that commenter does. Every time they see a feed, they're like, oh, now's my chance to judge these people for not saying anything. And I'll say nothing to do that. Yeah. Right? It's like
saying nothing about nothing.
Exactly. But the point is the short-term feeling better. The point is to be able to go, no, I'm a little farther from that hell now. Not realizing they just reinforced that hell. Mm-hmm. So for somebody who's not necessarily in that hell, it's not avoiding people who are in that hell. It's recognizing it doesn't really exist. Like that person, can comment all day till we get tired of them and block them. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing.
No.
There's nothing wrong with judging themselves. There's nothing wrong with being insecure, but it's them running from it that makes it worse. If they could just go, yeah, I guess that's a good point. I'm not actually adding anything to this conversation, and I'm doing it more or less just so I can hear my own voice. Or in this case, so I can hear my own bullshit and feel a little better according to my assumptions of you. Because if they were here in the room, they wouldn't say a fucking word. That's the funniest part. They wouldn't be sitting there across the table from you going, you don't say anything important. You're not saying anything of substance. You're not saying anything that's going anywhere. They wouldn't say that. They would sit there and shut their fucking hole, or they would try to add something to the conversation. And so this is entirely just masturbation. That's all that is. It's just like, I'm sitting at home. I'm not feeling really good. So I'm going to stare at the screen, make some assumptions, and basically stroke my ego.
Right.
And only as far as it goes until somebody notices. And then what's the typical response? I love this. Oh, you're so triggered.
Right.
Why? Because we're commenting on how ridiculous you look, and how obvious it is that you're acting out insecurity. And that's the conversation nobody wants to have, because we don't want to have it with ourselves, and it just sounds fucking unpleasant. But that's the point. And that's why I like our retreats. Our retreats are very much hey, I'm insecure, and everybody's like, yeah, welcome.
Right.
That's cool. And there's strength. Strength is in being vulnerable. It's not in pretending to be stronger than other people. That's just another act of fear.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because if you're feeling really insecure and assume that you shouldn't be, that's gonna put you in this back and forth sort of sense, because you're already feeling insecure, and then on top of that, you're like, well, I gotta get rid of this, or this shouldn't be happening, and it just like spins around and around and around. And even with the judgment stuff too, like I've had points throughout my life where I've made sort of stark, like, I'm gonna do this differently, or I'm gonna stop giving a fuck what anyone thinks of me. And like there have been points where it was like it hit me very hard that I'm like, why would I live for anyone else? And it hit me like for the first time, I think, when I was 17, and it was going through, I had this internship over the summer, and I was thinking like, oh, it'd be cool to have a different one, because like this one's a little bit out of the ordinary, and I have to explain it every time someone asks, instead of just being able to be like, oh yeah, this banking internship, or this fucking consulting internship. And I dealt with that internally for a good bit, and kind of going back and forth. And then it hit me one day, and I was like, hold on, all these people are living lives just as full as mine. Why the fuck am I focused on what they might think of how I respond? Despite every time I explained it or talked about it, like most people were like, that's really interesting. That's cool. It was all just from myself. And so even like right now, feeling a shift of like, okay, I've been going back and forth with like a lot of fear of judgment, admittedly. And so if you can twist that, and it's like, maybe this is a quick fix, whatever, but it can help to shift things to, trying to be judged almost, or like, pushing for that, not in a controlled sense, but just being willing to let yourself go a little bit and even like run towards the judgment, like be a little bit more absurd or ridiculous. Sometimes that's what you need to like shift things enough. Otherwise it's like there's not enough momentum almost to
Right.
change. And it's not to say there's not, but you know, sometimes running towards it, being like, fuck it, I'm gonna spend a day, a week, this, you know, call, just like trying to be judged, because then all those things that you're insecure about, all those things you're worried about getting judged for, it's like those are all on the table, and then there isn't so much of that internal resistance. Like there isn't so much fight towards, you know, what may play out or how you might act, because that sense of trying to keep yourself under control comes from a lot of judgment that we don't even necessarily realize, because it's so, I don't know, universally accepted, or it seems like.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's just going in and going, right, I judge myself for this. That doesn't mean I have to. I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna come out of it and judge myself. Karaoke is a great example. Like if you've never went to karaoke, go to karaoke. Just get the first song in. That's all you need to do. Just get one song in. Just go up
Break
and
the seal.
just break the seal. And because all of a sudden now your brain has went, oh, that's doable.
Yep.
Not, oh, wow, there's such a big gap from doing it to not doing it. Like from being where I am to getting there. It's a huge gap where you just cross it once and all of a sudden your brain's like, that's not really that big a gap. You know, and it becomes easier to do. It's not that you suddenly become more confident. You just stop convincing yourself it's impossible. And if it's possible, now there's something that you can do with that. You can adapt to that. You can get used to that. It can become the familiar.
Yeah.
And once it's the familiar, all of your thoughts about it start to fade away because you come back to the impression that you know what's going to happen. And that's the danger there as well, right? You never know. And that's why you should push. That's why you should do new things. Try new songs. Try songs you've never done before.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe do a little dance up on the stage, you know, if that's your personal fear. Because that's the stuff where you're like, yeah, I can do that. And maybe I didn't like it after I did it, but at least I did it. Now I know. You know, it changes things. You start to recognize that idea in your head, I can't do that. It's just an idea.
Right. It's just a concept. I mean, there are so many times that I've heard that saying, the hardest step is the first one. And it's because there's so much doubt before you take that first step, but then taking it, you're like, oh, I can do this. This is fantastic. And so I love karaoke as an example, because no matter how many times I've done karaoke, I'm always nervous before the first song on a new experience with karaoke. And it's always because I'm like, oh no, you know, am I supposed to warm up my voice? Like, am I like, what songs? You know, we just finished a round of like, or an experience of being cold and having a flu. And so I'm like, is my throat healed enough? Am I ready? Then I'm like, well, there's only one way to find out. You just jump in. And it's so funny because your mind will be a shovel and all of a sudden your thoughts become the pit. And then your mind is telling you that it's a ladder as it's acting like a shovel. And every time it just keeps being in that shovel mode, it's just making more thoughts, making the pit deeper. But once you can see that, you're like, oh shit, I'm being a shovel. I'm digging this pit deeper and deeper. And even just feeling that, just recognizing that, instantly it feels like the shovel becomes a stage. And now the mind is a platform for ideas, for experimentation, for you to just say, fuck it, and just find out and just move forward. And so on that stage, you are playing out different opportunities instead of being the shovel and saying you're a ladder. And digging deeper into the doubt instead of just realizing, yeah, well, let's find out if let's call that doubt's bluff. And usually it is a bluff, but you won't find out until you take that step.
And I don't want to take that step because I doubt.
Yep.
It's like that's the back and forth, and like at some point you just gotta make that jump through the door. But it's kind of like, I was thinking of it like a familiarity bar. It's like everything you do that's new is getting you closer to like being quote unquote familiar, but you're always getting more familiar with things. Yeah. And so there's going to be, and I wonder if there's like anyone's thought about that with like stages of familiarity. Like at first it's like, you know, the beginner's luck type thing. You try it for the first time, and then it's like you start figuring things out, and then it's like, oh, you realize you're have way less experience than everyone, aren't nearly as good as all these people, and all the judgments start flooding in, despite you not having done it as
Of
many
course.
times, because it's just like time and attention. Someone who's really good at something, yeah, from time to time there's like prodigies and whatnot, but for the most part, even if someone is really young and really good at something, like they probably spent a shitload of time as a kid. Like as a kid, if you get really into something, obsessed with something, like there's, you know, in a lot of situations, a decent amount of time that you can focus on it. And so you're getting a lot of hours in, and a lot of hours without, most of the time, much self-judgment at all. And so that familiarity bar is like all we're looking at. So anytime you're in a new situation, it's like that those first periods when it's unfamiliar, of course it's going to be uncomfortable. Of course, all the things that maybe were in the background or under the surface when you were in a more familiar environment, like those start to arise, you know, because you're now in an unfamiliar environment, and there's shitloads of environments out there that are unfamiliar to you. And so you want to see, you know, where your discomforts are, like get into an unfamiliar environment and find out. But like we're able to con ourselves into believing that we don't have insecurities, that we're not afraid of certain things, that we've, you know, overcome all this stuff just because we stay in familiar environments throughout our life, you know, throughout a lot of our life, and maybe haven't spent that much time in unfamiliar environments. Like I have definitely can remember now, like I went to 3 different high schools throughout high school, and each and every time there was a extended period of me being unfamiliar with it and very uncomfortable, basically, and getting, because my immediate go-to is kind of shelling up, restricting myself, but also it comes with assuming like there's somewhere else that I should be, or an attachment to the previously familiar thing. I got familiar with that and then went to new situation, and then unfamiliar, had a certain response, and eventually, you know, you let go of the assumption that any of the familiar environments would be better. But like I think being honest about the unfamiliar definitely maybe doesn't help the feelings and going through that discomfort, but at least being aware. It's not like like why would you think jumping into an unfamiliar environment you're going to be, you know, good to go and not go through anything that entire time? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But exactly our brain will assume that we should jump into something and just be like, oh yeah, of course it's going to be exactly like the familiar environment I just came from. It's like, no, it's not at all, because you went through that period in the previous environments and you don't even remember those initial steps, and each environment's going to be different, so the adaptation is going to be different. But there are ways to at least not make it heavier for yourself. And I think that's the difference.
This is the process I literally bank on. We've talked about this previously. Just keep moving forward, because everything has been that. Everything, including descending into this worldly body. This was unfamiliar as fuck, right?
Once upon a time.
Absolutely. Being a parent, watching my kid learn how to use her fingers individually blew my mind, because I was just like, holy shit, I was there once.
That's right. It blew her mind as she was doing it. She's
you
like,
know, like that was a thing that at one point was unfamiliar. I took that shit for granted. You know, so this is the path of mastery to everything, but it's almost like a multi-layered path, because you can get familiar with little individual things, but that's also helping you to become familiar with yourself as a whole. So all of a sudden, not only are you mastering, I don't know, carpentry or crochet, but you're mastering a little bit more patience, mastering a little bit more self-acceptance, mastering a little bit more of that process that you were talking about just allowing yourself to become familiar over time, to actually pay attention. But that's what changes. That paying attention. It's like, no, I need to get better at this faster. That's taking away your attention, right? That's why I love that story. It's like, you know, how long to become a Kung Fu master? 10 years. Well, what if I work twice as hard as everybody else? You know, spend twice as much time? 20 years. And the entire point is the mentality that's keeping you from actually taking in the information, which is your need to get to the end of it where you're taking in the information.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that funny? What do masters learn in any chosen craft? Just slow the fuck down.
Mm-hmm.
Just slow down, take your time, pay attention. Almost as if that's exactly what the lesson has been the entire time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's the underlying lesson behind life. And that's what we're doing over the course of our life as we go from young and foolish and in a hurry to older, where we're like, oh no, it'll take care of itself. Just relax. We'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself some time. Don't be so hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. All of these are exactly that. Just give yourself a little bit of breathing room. It'll work itself out. You'll become familiar over time because you are intelligence in motion, right? That's it. But we want to be in control of that. We're like, well, if I go into this, there should be a way I can get to being good at this faster. That's what we want, instead of just recognizing you're already intelligence in motion. Just put yourself in this situation and pay attention. You're going to learn it as fast as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Pushing yourself does nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing at all except distract you from what you want to learn.
And it delays that express experience that you're running towards. And I love the discussion about beginner's luck and what masters tend to learn, because we talk about beginner's luck, and usually people are like, oh, it's a one-off, it's an outlier of an experience. But it's like, let's take a closer look at beginner's luck, because usually when you're doing something for the first time, you are paying such close attention. You are usually taking your time because you're taking that extra attention, and you're kind of embodying that master's ease, that master's attention the first time that you're doing something. So you tend to produce the results. And so they call it beginner's luck. But I think it's just that you have this beginner who is embodying a lot of the mentality that you would get from putting time and attention and putting in 1,000 reps into that particular task. And so that beginner is embodying that because they absolutely have to. This is my first time playing pool. I am absolutely paying so much more attention to how I'm holding the stick, where I'm pointing it, where the balls are. I'm paying such close attention because I've never done it before. I'm doing exactly what a master would do after 1,000 reps, after just knowing. Or after living the context, living through that experience. And then I will see other people playing, and I'm thinking, oh, they must be better than me because they've done this more than once.
Yeah.
And then I start to have the doubt, and then I lose that beginner's luck because I switch it out for beginner's doubt.
Yeah.
But I just embodied the same mentality that a master would, which was paying attention, slowing down, and being sensitive to the moment, and then being able to produce those results without intending to, because there was no expectation. But guess what comes with doubt? Expectation to do better.
Yeah.
Well said.
Wonder if it was a master who first said beginner's luck.
Like an asshole.
Yeah,
I bet you it was.
Yeah.
He was just jealous.
Right? Because as a master, it's not luck now. It's all me.
Exactly. I'm special. I have learned how to be special. You can't just walk in here and start doing the shit I'm doing.
How dare you? It must be something else. But yeah, because that sense of being a master, even too, like there's not an end point where it's like you're a quote unquote master. If anything, the more you learn is that that process doesn't end. Mm-hmm. There's not a spot in which it's like this end of the road type thing. And so if you can recognize that, and then it's like just time and attention for anything, then it's not just about the time. It's not just about the 10, 20, 30, however many reps you get in. Mm-hmm. It's a combination. It's absolutely a combination. But, if you are feeling like a beginner and feeling like there's a way to, control your way to, that comes immediately with an endpoint. Like, control your way to what? Control your way to not feeling like you need to be in control so much. Yeah.
Controlling my way to value.
Exactly. Despite, the process that you're on, the learning itself, like that's what, if anything, like providing value is fully experiencing that process, like paying full attention. Mm-hmm. Like that's, if anything, what you're learning. So it doesn't even have to do with the time that you spend, but the more attention you pay, the more time you spend doing things that make more sense, and so as you pay attention and notice things even about how you're doing something, like with pool, that maybe you would tweak, or notice certain tendencies, mm-hmm. or notice when you are judging yourself or trying to, play better or get better or improve, despite whether it's a master or a beginner.
Mhm.
They got a shot right there,
Right.
and it's like if they put it in the right spot at the right, at the right amount of force, then
Mhm.
it's both. A beginner could beat a master at any point,
Mhm.
and you never really know.
Well,
So
it's funny though, right? Like our perspective again can change very, very easily. Like you can be a master of shooting pool,
Mhm.
but are you a whiny little bitch when you miss that shot?
Right.
Right? Are you
Right.
sitting there pounding your feet, screaming a little bit on the inside, beating yourself up because you didn't get it? Because
Do you
to
throw a
me,
master tantrum?
that might exactly, because that's really another layer to what you're learning about yourself.
Mhm.
The journey of life becoming more familiar, the experience of your relationship with here and now being more familiar. And I find that that's one of the things at the retreats that a lot of people end up saying. It's like, oh, wow, it really is about my relationship with myself right now.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what that is. And that's the hardest one to master and become familiar with, because you are so much. How can you become familiar with being uncertainty? Because that is existence as a whole. And so you almost have to just surrender to it and go, well, I'm going to go through this process of feeling like I don't know, and then feeling like I know, and then recognizing I don't know, and then feeling like I know that, and then recognizing that I caught myself up in bullshit again, and recognizing that I don't know. And that's really what it is, until your life becomes this incredible, fulfilling process. And you've gone through so many different things that you told yourself you couldn't do and did.
Mhm.
And that's why this is all very amazing, because when you do that and you get farther down the road, let's just say you come to this point where you're like, wow, I did all that stuff, and yet I don't feel like I can take any credit for it, because it really was the process of just moving forward.
Mhm.
And you realize that from the very start, taking credit for it was never really the point. It was never the payoff that you thought it was. Taking credit for being good at your life is a very shallow, temporary high. But actually enjoying your life, actually being in your life, to live your life without needing to take credit for it, which means without having to take shit for it either,
Mhm.
that's way more. Because at least that's an ongoing experience with twists and turns that have nothing to do with your value at all. So this has been fun so far. I know we got like 90 seconds left before we continue on to Patreon. Just wanted to mention again, the Fort Alberni retreat is going to be coming up. We are planning 2025 events right now. Keep an eye out for that. Very excited. We're going to get some of those listed in the next little while here. Just a quick reminder, and I mean this sincerely. If you want to come to a retreat, listen to season 1. Just go through season 1.
Yes.
And if you haven't went through season 1 in a while, I highly recommend going through season 1 again. It's been a long time. I haven't actually went through season 1 since we recorded it.
Revisit,
But
season
the
one.
community, or not the community topics, the commentary episodes, those have been a blast, and I know we've got a few more of those to do and record and whatnot, but there's a lot of good stuff in that first season, and I feel like it's very much a journey, but season 1 is all about uncertainty.
Mhm.
Everything else is the path to familiarity, so you can go right back to being uncertain. It's a good journey. That's it for today, everybody. Check out the Dualistic Unity Life Troubleshooter. If you haven't already, go to dualisticunity.com/troubleshooter, or just check it out in the ChatGPT store. That shit's free now. You don't need a GPT Plus account. It's free. Check it out. It's awesome.
Highly recommend.
Yes, check it out. Where is that? Do we want to throw it up here?
We could,
Mhm.
if you can find it.
If I can find it.
I think we passed it. There it is.
There
Boom.
we go.
For everybody listening,
Boom.
we were
All right.
looking for the QR code.
Yes.
And we found it.
There it is.
On the
Simplifying
screen.
Existence.
Check out the Life Troubleshooter, and it's awesome. And give us your feedback. Tell us what you think. We're going to be on Patreon in 15 minutes.